when the cancel culture mob comes for you, they don't want you to just lose your job temporarily where you got to go find a new job. They want to make sure that you are destroyed for life.
I'm Eric Wilson, managing partner of Startup Caucus, an investment fund and incubator for Republican campaign technology. Welcome to the Business of Politics show. On this podcast, we bring you into conversation with the entrepreneurs who build best-in-class political businesses, the funders who provide the capital, and the operatives who put it all together to win campaigns. Today, we're speaking with my friend Wesley Donehue, founder of Push Digital and the Lawrence Group. He works with candidates, political committees, issue advocacy groups, and corporations on crisis communications, brand reputation, and digital strategy. He does it all. Wesley is the author of the just-released book, Under Fire, 13 Rules for Surviving Cancel Culture and Other Crises. On today's show, we talk about how you can prepare for a PR crisis, what to do after you've survived one, and how Wesley manages to run 3 businesses. All right, Wesley, nobody ever plans to be in a crisis. And it's hard to know exactly what will cause it, right? But in your book, you say that everyone should be prepared because it's a matter of when, not if. Well, what's the most important thing for someone to do before a crisis hits?
You know what, man? This is really weird because I don't think any other strategist would focus on this. But I think the very first thing you could do really immediately is the mental preparation of remaining calm when the crap hits the fan, right? And there's always something going on in your life for most people that is going to suck. It might be dealing with screaming children, right? You're trying to work and the kids are screaming at you, or you're having trouble with a client, or maybe you're having a health problem, right? But most of us have some sort of trouble in our lives. And those that can't handle those tough situations, I say, are the people that are mentally weak, that don't know how to put themselves in the right mindset. So, I talk about how daily meditation helps, reading Stoicism. For me, embracing the suck, putting myself in painful situations. I do a lot of marathons, ultra marathon, Ironman. I've done 2 Ironman triathlons. And I find that the people that understand how to remain calm in the storm are the ones that typically survive.
So it's not so much a matter of preparing for a specific thing or having talking points ready. It is the mental preparation, knowing that, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it, which is the core of Stoicism.
That's right. And, Stoicism says there is no good, there is no bad. It's only the way we react to it that makes it good or bad. It's only our internal feelings that makes a situation good or bad. So if you approach it with that understanding, if you can remain calm in the storm, you're going to be able to survive it, or at least be able to take a step back to be able to put a plan in place. Because as you said, you never know the specific communication issue you're going to have, right? But you're never going to be able to create that communication plan or create those talking points if you're going crazy, if you're spastic, right? The people that are freaking out are the people that can't get out of their own way. With that said, there are some other things that you could do in the beginning, such as have a team in place. Know that when this happens, who's the person I'm going to call that can help me out? I say it's a lot like having car insurance, right? You don't want to get in a wreck, and you don't know how bad the wreck's going to be, but one day you're likely to get in a wreck. It might just be a little fender bender. It might be something catastrophic that puts you in the hospital. You might cause it. Someone else might cause it. You don't know the specifics. All you know is that you have to have insurance, and who's the first call I'm going to make when this accident happens.
Well, it seems to me, Wesley, that the only way that you can get better at being calm is to have more practice and experience. I'll just give an example from a campaign. You and I worked through one of the worst debate performances in modern political history. I won't name any names, but it has now made me really calm for every other debate, right? Because I know how bad it can be, and it actually isn't that bad, right? In the grand scheme of things. And so what, aside from throwing yourself into crises and hopefully you're not making mistakes on purpose. What can people do to get that practice? Is it, like what you're talking about with your sort of tests of endurance, feats of strength, or are there practices, things like that you would recommend to get into that preparedness?
Yeah. So, I think I'm really good at this, and I talk about it in the book. I think I'm really good at this because I like to say I came from crisis, right? I came from a lot of drama. I'm a welfare kid who grew up on the wrong side of the tracks, and come from a very violent family. And there was always some sort of major drama happening in my life, so that by the time I became an adult, drama was normal to me. In fact, sometimes it's so normal that I feel uncomfortable when there isn't that kind of drama in my life, and I hate it, but it's true. Whenever you grew up in a poverty and borderline homeless and welfare kid the way I did, you find that these kind of situations people find themselves in are easier to deal with. But if you don't have that kind of background, I think it's a military term: embrace the suck. Like, how can you make things really bad on yourself? How can you embrace pain a little bit, not just physical but mental pain? I think that's real key, because people that understand how to make it through those dark times, people that know how to embrace the suck. So it doesn't have to be go out and run a marathon. How about daily cold showers? I hate the cold, man. I would rather run a 26-mile marathon than a 2-minute cold shower. I hate it that much. How can you do things on a daily basis that really, really suck, really bad, so that when things truly suck in your life, your brain is calloused? There's a great book by David Goggins called Can't Hurt Me, and he talks about callousing your brain the way a blue collar worker calluses his hands, right? So when you callous your brain, now for you, you're very similar to me, right? We've been through so much political drama that now, like, any kind of political drama just doesn't matter. We've been there, we've seen it. And if we haven't seen that specific circumstance, we've at least felt that kind of pain. So your brain's calloused the way my brain's calloused, but you see a lot of politicians failing. And I talk in the book about, like, Mark Sanford here in South Carolina, about how he failed so bad because he didn't know how to embrace the suck. He was mentally weak, so he faltered in that situation. Where you see a lot of other politicians able to survive it because they understand how to embrace the suck.
Got it. Yeah, in the new book, you write that the internet can also be a dangerous battlefield, with pretty dramatic language, and it's made even more dangerous by someone who doesn't get how the internet works. With new platforms coming online every day that we can't all possibly understand, how can someone stay up to speed with how the internet works and knowing the terrain of the battlefield, as you put it?
Yeah, it's pretty difficult, right? Because it does change very rapidly. I own a digital firm of over 50 people, and it's hard for me to keep up. And this is my full-time job. But, we like to talk about big politicians and big corporations and celebrities. But I have a friend locally who owns some restaurants and had an employee say they were fired for racist reasons. And she went and left all these Yelp reviews and Google reviews, and then she posted them on Facebook. And then before you know it, thousands of people were sharing those Yelp and Google reviews on Facebook. And it went, I don't want to say viral, but from a local standpoint, local viral, if that's a thing. Maybe I just coined it. But so even like the individual and the small business owner has to understand that the internet is life now. It's not the supplementary thing that people are just playing on when they get home. Real life is secondary. The internet is becoming the primary place people live their life, and that's going to even become more so when Web3 and the metaverse comes, right? So they have to understand that every real life action is being then pushed online, and they really have to understand those very specific platforms. So if you're a restaurant, then Yelp is very important and Google reviews are very important. But if you're a politician, then maybe Twitter is more important, or Truth Social, which is out now, or Getter, for example. So what I would say in that case is just understand the specific industry and then look and say, all right, where am I most vulnerable on the internet?
Yeah, I think that's the biggest gap, right? For people who believe that the internet is real life versus those that don't, right?
Right.
And that's really where I see the biggest sign of success. Another piece of conventional wisdom that we were taught coming up is that you don't rub the spot on the wall, meaning that you don't elevate an attack or a vulnerability by responding to it. Instead, you actually advise to get all the facts out before your critics, your opponents, or your competitors do. Why has that changed?
Yeah, so this book was very hard to write, Eric, because people are going to want to turn to this book and apply everything to their specific situation. And that's why I say these are rules or lessons rather than a guidebook, right? And I say this is the case in most situations, but it's not the case in all situations. But most of the time on the internet, an unchecked lie becomes truth. It just does. So, 50 years from now, my grandkids might Google my name and see that I did something or said something because I didn't correct that in the moment.
Mm.
So, back to my friend who has the restaurant, if they don't respond to that attack, then all of a sudden that restaurant is racist, right? They don't have a choice. They have to get out the facts and say, well, this employee did X, Y, and Z, and that's why they're saying this. So every situation is different, but I just find that in most cases, if you just let that lie continue, it's just going to snowball down the hill and just get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger until it gets so big that you can't respond to it.
Right. And I agree with you because that worked. And there was a reason the wisdom is conventional, because it worked at one point when you had editors and reporters and the TV producers, and they were the ones who decided what got discussed.
Yep.
And if you talked about something, it was something that they had to discuss. But because of social media, because of the internet, it's not a dialogue. It is a conversation.
Yep.
Anyone can speak. There are no gatekeepers. And just one, sort of behavioral science finding to back this up is the concept of participation inequality, which we know for any social network, there are about 90% of people who are lurking. They're only ever going to read. And so if they see, to the example of the Yelp review, if they see that and it's not rebutted, well, they think you don't have a good answer.
That's exactly right. Now, to play devil's advocate, though, and sometimes the reason you might not want to respond to everything is that crisis and drama has become our lives now. And remember, Eric, back in the day when we were young, getting into politics, and there was this concept of like a one-day news story or like a Friday news dump, and you wanted to get all the news out or here's a concept that no longer exists: a slow news day. Right now, there's so much crisis that sometimes you don't want to respond because within 10 minutes there will be another crisis to cover that crisis up. I mean, especially when we've got inflation happening, gas prices, someone wanting to murder the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, a possible recession coming, maybe even a depression if it gets too bad. The stock market's plummeting. My crypto's plummeting. That's all just this week, right?
Yeah, it's exhausting.
It's insane. So you could have a U.S. Senate candidate and the biggest bomb can drop on that U.S. Senate candidate, but nobody pays attention anymore because there's so much other massive drama happening around the world right now. Oh yeah, and a madman with nuclear weapons wanting to invade other countries. So, it's insane how fast news is moving and just how dramatic it all is right now. So sometimes those minor stories are getting covered up.
Right. So Wesley, the term cancel culture gets thrown around a lot. Mm-hmm. And I don't think that there is it's sort of like fake news, right? Where it used to mean something, now it just means like, I disagree with that.
That's right.
And so, can you define cancel culture for our audience, and how does that specifically interact with politics and public affairs?
Yeah, I think cancel culture is different than just disagreeing with someone, because in cancel culture, they're legitimately trying to shut a person down permanently. They want to cancel them permanently, and there's no redemption for that person. When the cancel culture mob comes for you, they don't want you to just lose your job temporarily where you got to go find a new job. They want to make sure that you are destroyed for life and that you don't have the ability to even get a job, and that you can't provide for your kids, or that a business is completely shut down, or that an actor never gets an acting gig again. They want to cancel that person out of existence. And I think that's a really sad point in our culture, that there is no forgiveness. I mean, I know you're very religious. You and I have talked about it a lot over the years. I know you're deeply Catholic, and I'm Christian, and this is a Christian nation, and we're supposed to believe in forgiveness. We're supposed to believe in second chances, right? But we've gotten to this point where there is no redemption, there is no second chance. If you screw up one time, then you are just an evil, bad person. Now, don't get me wrong. There are a lot of people that maybe should happen to, right? If you're, I think we can all agree that maybe Kevin Spacey is a creep, right? Or like maybe Bill Cosby doesn't deserve any more chances, So yes, there are those kind of bad people, but you could, like in my case, what happened to me a few years ago, where I just sent out a tweet that I thought was funny. They wanted to come after me, make sure my business was shut down. They were commenting on pictures of my wife. They were going on my wife's Instagram, commenting on pictures of my children. I mean, it went way overboard. They wanted to make sure that I was completely shut down and that I could never work again. And I think that's what cancel culture really is.
Yeah, it's remarkable because, as you see religion recede from certainly the public square, but also private life as well, there's always going to be something that fills that gap, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in this case, we've got cancel culture, which is essentially the natural consequence of a culture or society that does not believe in grace and does not believe in reconciliation. And yes, it's a social media mob, but sometimes it can get much worse. And as you point out, lots of consequences. And so I do think it's important for listeners to understand that it can take on this religious fervor. It is not something that is rational.
That's right.
And you must be prepared for that.
Well, grace and love, obviously the whole primary, I think the theme of the Bible or Jesus Christ's life, love is if it's not there, it's going to be replaced by anger and hate. And that's the world we live in now. It's just become so personal for people that hate seems to fill a lot of people's hearts. And to be fair, it's on both sides. And I could even make the argument, since we're talking about religion, I could even make the argument that a lot of cancel culture started with Christians. And that if you go back and look at who were the first people saying, boycott that business, don't go to that business, a lot of that lies in our court, to be honest with you. I think now, if you look at it, it leans more towards the liberal side, but it's not like the liberals have a monopoly on cancel culture.
Right. That's a good observation, because it may be you today, but it'll be someone else tomorrow.
Absolutely.
So let's say that a candidate, a celebrity, a brand, whatever, has gone through being canceled. They've dealt with a scandal. How can they possibly recover their reputation after that?
Yeah, there's a whole chapter in the book. It's actually the last chapter about rebuilding the brand, and there is a lot to do to rebuild a brand. Like, we also talk a lot in the book about whether you should apologize or not apologize, and it's funny because we talk a lot about Donald Trump, right? Because he became the captain, he became the symbol of not apologizing, right? He loved just owning it. Most situations, people would say, well, you should apologize for that. And the man never did. Well, rebuilding the brand might be apologizing if you truly need to apologize. You don't need to apologize if you don't mean it. I never apologized when I was canceled. You might need to go on an apology tour. With SeaWorld, on the other hand, it was saying, hey, you're right. We're not going to breed any more killer whales. But at the same time, you can't let killer whales that were born in captivity just out in the ocean, because they'll die, right? So it was, how can we not breed any more killer whales? How can we make the environment better? How can we not have shows anymore where trainers ride orcas and make them do flips? Instead, how can we make this more of an educational experience? And then with SeaWorld, we created the See It Here, Save It There campaign, where SeaWorld's actually one of the largest conservation groups in the entire country and spend a large portion of their profits on the rescue and rehabilitation of sea life, and nobody knew that. So a lot of it was an educational campaign to let people know uh, all the great things that SeaWorld was doing. But it's going to be different for every situation. But we do lay out in the book some examples of what other people have done in the past. Maybe you're a part of a big charity that nobody knows about. So it's going to be specific to each person, but there definitely is a rebuilding the brand process that anybody really can undergo.
You're listening to the Business of Politics show. I'm speaking with Wesley Donehue about his new book, Under Fire, 13 Rules for Surviving Cancel Culture and Other Crises. Wes, I got to ask, you're a digital guy. Why'd you write a book?
um, I wanted to write this book specifically for two reasons. One, I wanted to tell my own story, what happened when we hadn't talked about it much, but I own a brewery, and some folks came after me a few years ago, and I survived it. And I am better off in my life than I've ever been right now. And I could not be in a better place. I'm living the dream. I know it's cliche to say, but to be a welfare kid and to be where I'm at today, I'm living the dream, and I didn't let the mob survive. And unfortunately, I see the mob winning against a lot of people who just accidentally screwed up, and I don't think it's very fair. But then on the other side, I see a lot of corporations that are also being canceled for reasons beyond their control. And I think that they can look at the SeaWorld lessons and really learn something from it. Frankly, I just don't like what I see happening in the world today, man. There's too much anger, too much hate. I think this cancel culture thing has gotten completely out of hand, and I think it needs to be stopped. And if I could be a part of that, I'd like to be.
So you mentioned things are going really well. You're a serial entrepreneur. You're operating 3 businesses right now. What systems do you put in place to stay on top of everything?
Um, it took me a long time to realize this. By the way, my second book, which I hadn't even started yet, but I got this idea of writing a book about how not to run companies because like everybody writes the book of like, be like me and run a company like me and get rich like me. I want to write the complete opposite of like, don't be like me and here are all the mistakes I made in running a business and don't do that. And one of the biggest things I screwed up in, and Push is 12 years old now. I micromanaged for a long time, and you worked with me. We did Rubio's presidential campaign together, and you probably remember I like to micromanage a lot of things. And I learned that once I hire the right people and I put the systems in place and I just trust the people that I hired to do their job, and I stop micromanaging all my clients and all the creative and every aspect of the business itself, my company started really taking off. So I just got out of my own way and things started going really well.
Wesley, you're also an investor. And so I want to ask you, what's a problem or opportunity that you see in politics or public affairs that you'd like to see a startup tackle with a new product?
Yeah, let me start with the public relations side. And I'm not necessarily sure it's a product, but definitely business. I think the biggest problem in marketing and PR is that they're dominated by liberals. And I think we need more PR firms that have a conservative slant to them. Because if you see a lot of companies nationally doing woke things, and people are always wondering, why are these corporations doing this thing that's so liberal and so leftist? It's because they're getting all their advice from liberals. They're getting all their advice from the large agencies that are in New York and LA and a lot of them in DC. And Eric, because you're part of the biz, that most of these massive marketing agencies, especially the PR firms out of New York, they're all dominated by liberals. So what happens is they're catering to the big city liberals and all your flyover conservative states and all your southern states. That's, at least half of a customer base. Mm-hmm. The values of those people are being ignored for the big city liberals because that's where the marketing agencies, that's where those staff live. So I think there is a massive void for conservative PR agencies because I think a corporation should be hiring both. I think you've got to hear from both sides. Hear from your big New York liberal agency, but also hear from your agency that specifically specializes in reaching conservative clientele.
Right. I think there's a really important thing here, and I don't think it's the case that the people who are professionals in very liberal big cities or liberal industries are, or I should say industries that are dominated by liberals are doing this intentionally.
No.
I think it's a blind spot for them. I think anyone who understands implicit bias knows that it can't be avoided. And so it's a really interesting perspective of, how do you get that other perspective in the room? And it starts with being aware that you might not have it.
Yeah, I don't. Again, you're right. I don't think it's like some intentional plan to drive this corporation to the left. I think that they're just in their own little bubble,
Mhm.
and they think their values are the values that everybody else shares. I mean, no offense. I know you're in DC, but I kind of sometimes say the same thing about a lot of the consulting shops in DC. They're in the DC bubble, so sometimes they forget about how the normal people out in the barber shop in the middle of Nebraska are thinking sometimes. So we all have our bias based on our friends and the community in which we live, and I think it's a major problem on the PR side. On the political side, I think there is a major data problem and a major fundraising problem right now. There is a lot of data being shared and stolen, and donors. We're having a large problem. Every digital agency and every campaign, every one of them, are having fundraising troubles right now. Part of it's the environment, but the other part is that people are just being bombarded. I donated to a superintendent of education candidate in South Carolina the other day, and 8 hours later, I started getting Donald Trump emails, and I got 16 emails in one day from Donald Trump. So I don't really know what's going on the Republican side, but someone has to figure out how we can fix fundraising, because if we don't, we're going to have a major problem. I think all the campaigns are about 20% below where they want to be in digital fundraising right now. And I think a large part of it is that everybody's just getting bombarded, and you can't even grow your own house file with that house file being shared to 12 other candidates. And I'm hearing it all the time from my mother-in-law, who made one donation, and then all of a sudden she's getting 20 texts a day and 20 emails a day. It is killing campaigns right now, Eric. And I don't know if it's an internal issue we have to fix with the RNC. I don't know if it's an issue we got to fix with WinRed, or if it's just that we need to invest in some companies that can help fix the problem. But this cycle, we're going to be in a massive problem. We're going to have a massive problem because our candidates are going to be underfunded because of this reason.
That's something that we're keeping an eye on for sure. And I think it's a big risk. And my thesis behind the cause is that we are competing for the same donors rather than opening the tent, so to speak, and bringing more people in. And so it's far easier to go after someone who's donated in the past than to cultivate a new donor.
It absolutely is. But it's not a coincidence that I donate and immediately start getting blown up, or my mother-in-law donates and immediately starts getting blown up. There are some data sharing and data theft issues going on in the Republican Party right now, and we have to fix it. And I'm sure I'm going to get in trouble and start getting my phone blown up for even bringing this up. But if we don't fix it, man, I'm telling you, we're not going to get some. I mean, we're in a great atmosphere for Republicans. Don't get me wrong. But we're going to have some funding issues heading into November if we don't fix this.
I actually think that this might be a space where Web3 and blockchain comes into play, where if you as the donor have some security around, certainly you've got to give the identity, but we're seeing it with like Apple mail protection program, where you don't have to give your email. Well, you can give an email address and it's only used for that merchant. But giving donors an opportunity to say, I don't want my data shared, or I'm happy to have my data shared, but you pay me for some of that.
100%. I love that idea, man. I think you're right.
Well, thanks, Wesley, for joining me today. I encourage all of our listeners to check out his new book, Under Fire, 13 Rules for Surviving Cancel Culture and Other Crises. It's out now wherever you buy or read books. And remember to subscribe to the Business of Politics show, wherever you listen to podcasts. And share this episode if we gave you something to think about or made you a little bit smarter today. With that, we'll see you next time. Thanks for listening.